Hello, I am Luke and welcome back to the channel. This is Coach Fulton. What we're going to be covering today is the best accessories to build strength through hypertrophy. Now, we all know that the compound lifts, our squats, our bench, deadlifts, overhead press, these are our bread and butter. These are the things that will make about anyone better, be that in the strength field or whether that comes down to just trying to put on a bit of muscle. That is absolutely true, and these exercises do and have reigned supreme for a long time. Now, I'm going to kind of introduce you to my background, why this is relevant to me and why it's going to be relevant to what we're talking about. I did fairly well in kind of powerlifting style training, and I got up some pretty big numbers in equivalence to my body weight, which is in powerlifting kind of the most important thing. But I had a really narrow base. I trained basically solely the compound barbell lifts, and it gave me some big numbers in equivalence to my body weight, but it didn't really round out my physique, and it left certain areas lacking, and eventually my progress on lifts began to lack. And this can be true for anyone that goes and specialises in strength training. If you seriously want to get better at these lifts long term and see better results in strength and hypertrophy, you need to widen your base and do kind of more bodybuilding style exercises to bring up potentially neglected muscles. These exercises are absolutely crucial for seeing improvement in performance and kind of ironing out any potential imbalances or weak points in a given compound lift. We're going to jump into these movements and why they're essential for your improvement. So first off the list, we're going to start off with squats, the absolute king of lower body movements. This is great for your strength and also great for leg and lower body hypertrophy. First up is any type of single leg work. Now, I'm not talking single leg presses or single leg extensions. Some people use these and have had good results with them, but I don't think they have really great carryover to reinforcing your squat. To be honest, you can pick really kind of any lunge type variation, be that Bulgarian split squats. Favourite of mine is actually walking lunges. I just like these much better than kind of any other of the alternatives. I find the kind of reverse lunges to be very glute heavy and kind of take away from the quad muscle. To be honest, if you get good at Bulgarian split squats, you will absolutely have monster legs and have really, really strong legs as well. I find walking lunges can be quite good because I think they're just easy to throw in. There's less of a footery setup, and I think they're just easier to motivate yourself to do. So sometimes when it comes to exercises, it is just picking the variation that you know you're going to do and sticking to it. The next variation for squats would be any kind of front-loaded squat. Ones that come to mind for me: front squats, Zercher squats, goblet squats, or even kind of like the safety bar squats, because there is a slight bias to being in kind of a motor pattern that's a bit more similar to a front squat. So although the bar does kind of go more behind you, it does have a much more similar impact to front squats than it does to a conventional back squat. The reason that these movements are good is they are just a harder variation. They're mechanically harder to perform, and that's always going to kind of plug any kind of weaknesses I find. You know, if you do any kind of variation that is like the main lift, but if you're just mechanically disadvantaged, that will always have great carryover. It's also good because it really does kind of put a bit more emphasis on the abdominal muscles, usually any kind of upper back discipline, and of course there is way more activation at the quads, so it just kind of leads in to a squat really nicely. Now, a squat isn't just activation at the quads. There is another component to it, and that is obviously the strength of the glutes and the lower back. These are obviously what helps that hip drive to get you into that top standing position. Now, we can't neglect those muscles as well. So some of the variations that I would really kind of outline for this, I think any type of good morning is absolutely key. Anyone that has like a squat that goes wrong ends up in a kind of good morning position. So if you can get yourself strong in that position, it just means if anything goes wrong in your squat, you're a little bit insured with the strength of your lower back and your hips. But also it is just really practical for isolating that hip drive whilst keeping the bar in a really relevant position. You know, if you take that and compare it to something like RDLs, yeah, the motor pattern is very similar. How your body's actually moving in a hinge is very similar. But I do think something has to be said about the practical takeaways of having the bar on your back, kind of similar to how it would be if you're squatting. It's not just bringing the muscles up, but there is a kind of functional recruitment. It puts you in as similar a position as you would be in. Next up is the deadlift. Now, deadlift is an absolute full body movement, great for the back, great for the glutes, great for the hamstrings, just great all over kind of strength developer. What we have to talk about is obviously the barbell row for our first variation. Now, you can really do any type of row. I think it does carry over to your deadlift. Ideally, it is going to be a kind of free weighted one. Your floating barbell row, just the average one that you've seen, is very good. It's great for maintaining not only the kind of upper back strength required for deadlifting, but also for maintaining your brace under heavy weight. But you can also take your rows and do something a bit more power specific. You know, I think that a dead row is really good, any kind of pendlay row, stuff that's quite explosive and allows you to use a lot of weight. A lot of people would say that the disadvantage of these is that they don't properly overload the eccentric because it is quite concentric heavy, but then again, so is the deadlift. So you have to kind of look at where, why you're doing what you're doing and where that's going to carry over. These ones are a little bit less, I suppose, conventionally hypertrophic, although I will say if you are taking some really heavy weight through that row positioning, there's no way that you're not going to build muscle. But these ones are a little bit more performance specific. Taking the kind of opposite approach, a lift that I actually personally really like and really personally like to use is a T-bar row. I think it just kind of puts you a little bit in the middle of the bar. It does take away from the kind of core stability required, but it can really take your upper back to new places, especially if you do kind of intensity techniques, be that, you know, strapping up when you're using it, or doing stuff like drop sets, like really kind of putting as much intensity, allowing yourself to do it as strictly as possible, and then transition quite nicely into some cheat reps. I find that that's one of my favourite things. I think with a T-bar or any kind of landmine attachment row, you really can get into it and really push yourself out into the weeds and kind of test the real capacity of your upper back. All too often, we don't test the capacity of our upper back, even on things like rows, because our brace, our grip, all these things fail before we get ourselves to kind of an adequate point of training to failure. You know, we may be training to failure for our grip on our rows, we train to failure for our brace, but we don't train to failure for our upper back. So it can be really good and it can be really impactful in that area to kind of do intensity techniques on a landmine attachment. Of course, we've got to talk about deadlift variations for the deadlift. If you want to get good at something, you have to do something that is very similar to your main lift. Now, what I've got to talk about is RDLs. I'm a really big fan of RDLs. They just help with that hypertrophy in the glutes, the upper back, the hamstrings. I think you kind of put more muscle on. I did a block once where I did fully scrap the deadlift and just RDL, and I feel like all those muscles were probably actually their absolute biggest because of that constant tension. You know, you're not just looking at the concentric deadlift that you slam back down. It is fully time under tension the entire process, which is really good for reinforcing the muscles required to be good at deadlifting. Another kind of deadlift variation that I do like for the deadlift and this is hypertrophic as well, is snatch grip deadlifts. A lot of people obviously talk about deficit deadlifts, and I think deficit deadlifts are really good as well. But what I like about snatch grip deadlifts is they naturally put you in a deficit because you're shortening your arms with that wide grip, but also you're getting some real upper back tightness and stability, whilst being maybe potentially a 3 or 4 inch deficit depending on how wide you've gripped that bar. Now on to bench press, the absolute golden lift that everybody loves. You know, if you go to the gym for any period of time, even people that don't lift will probably ask you, what do you bench? It's an amazing exercise, great for the chest, great for the triceps, but we're going to talk about exercises that can bring that up. Now, of course, we've got to go for similar movement patterning. One of the biggest things that actually impacted my bench press was adding in a second variation a week, and that was dumbbell bench press. I think it's really good. Obviously, you're controlling each dumbbell independently, so you're ironing out any imbalances. But not only that, it kind of allows a greater range of motion, and I think you get a better stretch in the pecs. You're going a little bit lower, you know, you're kind of drifting across, you're bringing them closer together. It is just a little bit more of a disadvantaged bench press, and it had one of the most profound effects on my ability to bench. Something we obviously need to talk about is any type of incline press. I really like an incline bench. I hadn't done it before, but when I got to a new gym, basically we only had the compounds, and we only had like racks and dumbbells. When I started doing incline presses, it really made the difference. You can usually use a fairly similar amount of weight to your bench press. Obviously it's reduced, but you can get a lot of practical carryover with barbell incline presses. You're in a near enough similar position, but once again, you're getting a little bit more range of motion on the pecs. And then also, you kind of hit that upper chest, which is good obviously for the hypertrophy, but will have carryover to your conventional bench press. Now, if you want to kind of take these two bits of advice together, one of my favourite variations is actually an incline dumbbell press. I think it's just really good. I've never had a better feeling in my pecs than when I have incline dumbbell press. It just takes the advantages of both the dumbbell bench and the incline press, or any of those 3 lifts given will have an amazing carryover to your bench pressing strength. Now, what I want to add on to bench press is one more type of variation, and it's a bit more broad. I think that any type of hypertrophy work, you know, fluff and pump, bodybuilder stuff, is actually really useful. You've got to look at how many bodybuilders have an amazing bench press, and it's because if you take the time to do extra pec hypertrophy, be that, you know, even stuff like flies, like they do add up. Even, you know, taking time to really focus on your tricep work will of course have great carryover to your bench press. So just being quite high volume on your accessory lifts, on the kind of isolations in the relevant regions, will have a positive carryover to your bench press. So next we have to get to the unsung hero of the compound lifts, the downtrodden king, the OHP. That is the shoulder press, your overhead press. That is one of the greatest developers for upper body strength, upper body hypertrophy, but a lot of people don't like it, and a lot of people skip it or think it's kind of a lesser lift, it's all front delt or whatever. That's what a lot of people say. I don't really think that's the case. I think if you also look at a lot of the guys that do overhead press and have much more competitive overhead presses than I've got, it really does have a positive impact. You have to talk about the push press. Push press is one of my favourite variations. It just allows you to really overload your shoulders and handle more weight than you could on your conventional overhead press, you know, your strict press. Being a little bit more, it's kind of the natural way of cheating the lift, but you obviously get the benefit that when you cheat it on the way up, you are absolutely getting a benefit bringing it back down again. You know, it's kind of like a little bit like an eccentric overload if you want to be a bit science-based about it. Just feeling the weights lock out above your head will mean that when you move back to strict press, getting kind of ambitious with your weight choices won't feel as intimidating because you'll probably have push pressed that weight for reps. The next example is more conventionally hypertrophic. It is your seated dumbbell press. This is really good. You can just really focus on overloading the shoulders. You can really kind of prevent any imbalances because you're controlling each dumbbell independently from the other. And because you're in that seated position, you can really focus on just that up and over push. You don't have to think about your back angle too much. You don't have to really kind of engage the same way you would on a standing overhead press. You can really just think about what can my shoulders do in this moment, how much can I give. Really allows you just to kind of hammer the shoulders and triceps in a way that you probably wouldn't be able to on a barbell overhead press. You can just kind of wire it down to the basic muscles involved and not really have to worry too much about your technique. As long as you're kind of moving it at a safe pattern, you're not kind of grinding too much on the shoulders, you should be absolutely brilliant, and you can just focus on getting that burn, really pushing yourself and seeing what you're capable of. Now we obviously have to once again talk about our accessories. That is going to be things like, you know, your lateral raises, your face pulls, you know, all that kind of dumb stuff that is going to keep your shoulders healthy. You know, you don't want to just press for your shoulders. It is really valuable to take times training the kind of other heads of the delts, training some of that kind of rotational action of the delts, because that's going to keep you injury free. It's also going to really contribute to your side delts and your rear delts, but it's most importantly going to keep you injury free so that you can keep the pressure nice and high on those compound lifts. So there you have it. That was my favourite accessories to the compound lifts, and where we were really looking to build strength through hypertrophy. Incorporating these exercises into your program will not only give you improvements on your compound lifts, but it's also just going to really bring up your hypertrophy. It's going to bring up the appearance of certain areas. Something that I've found is that when you do kind of take that barbell minimalism approach, when you do just focus on compounds, only working out with the barbell, leaning really heavily on those kind of core lifts, it does get you a lot of strength, but it does kind of leave you with this feeling of like, oh wait, does that guy lift? You know, these exercises will kind of give you a bit more of that appearance. It'll round you out. It'll be, not only will you be a guy that's really strong, but you'll look like you lift as well. Something that I obviously spoke about is that I was really heavily on the barbells for many years, and I'm really trying to focus now on rounding out those kind of neglected areas by branching out and using some of these more conventionally bodybuilding style approaches to kind of bring up the hypertrophy so that I can actually get through that wall and get that little bit stronger. So if you're looking to build more muscle, or you're looking to get stronger, prevent injuries, or just kind of want a little bit of change to your training, I think all of these exercises are going to be a welcome addition to your program. Now let me know down below, did you find this helpful? Did you disagree with any of the exercises? What's your experience with what I've listed here? If you liked the video, please like the video, subscribe so you can stay up to date with the latest ones, and comment down below if you managed to make it this far. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.